101.1 FM Lagos on YouTube to follow us.
All right, and our analyst this morning, the amazing Justin Ijeh. Good morning.
Morning, folks.
And the wonderful Gbolahan. His name is Gbolahan, and of course is at Gbolahan at Mr. G Quest on Twitter. Good morning.
Good morning, Valentine, and
Good
good
morning to
morning,
you.
Lagos.
Thank you so
Morning,
much for
Gbolahan.
joining
Morning,
us this
Ayo.
morning. Lagos, let's start with our first story from the Guardian newspaper. I'll come to you, Gbolahan, for this one. The story reads, the headline reads, Federal government kicks off process to privatize Bank of Agriculture. In the details, we'll find that they have sectioned it into a percentage, in a percentage scale, and sectioned it for different purposes, for different parastatals to get involved in. I like that the farmers own a 60% share of the bank, and federal government agencies own 40%. But break that down for us.
Yes, this is a step in the right direction by the government. I mean, we're talking about the Bank of Agriculture now, and looking at the importance or the drive of this current administration towards improving our agricultural output and the impact of agriculture in the economy as well too. I see this as a very important move going forward, because when you look at it going back, Bank of Agriculture, you rarely do hear much about what the Bank of Agriculture has been doing in terms of funding the agri sector. You always tend to hear a lot more of the Bank of Industries and the private banks as well too,
That's right.
financing a lot of all the projects. And
In fact, when I read the story by default, I thought it was Bank of Industry, and then
Absolutely.
I realized Bank of Agriculture. And
that they
it's-
do exist, but you
it's-
rarely
it's
see
good.
them much. So it's a good move. So what they're currently doing now is that they're talking about government owning 40% now, while the remaining 60% will be owned by the private sector. A lot of it will be the Ministry of Finance is going to own 20%. The CBN is also going to own another 20%. Then the remaining 60% will be owned partly by the farmers, and the rest would also be listed on the stock exchange as well. And why are we talking about listing on the stock exchange? Of course, you're looking at improving the corporate governance of this Bank of Agriculture, and the transparency as well too, so that of course when money goes in, it's accounted for, it's used for the right purposes. So it does make a lot of sense, and especially when you also look at it as well too, a lot of commercial banks tend not to lend to the agri sector. It's only just of recent as well too that there's been a lot of CBN drive and push in getting the commercial banks to lend a lot more to the agri sector. And the reason why they don't lend to the agri sector is because they don't understand the sector. And there's a lot of risk as well too that is involved. And even when they end up lending to that sector, which is the agri, they're lending at double-digit interest rates. You're talking about 22, 23, or whatever, 30% at max or so. So right now, at the moment, what the Bank of Agriculture will be doing, obviously, will be lending at single digits interest rate, which will be encouraging the farmers as well to farm and produce a lot more at a more profitable cost.
Yes.
So it's a very good development. And what this article actually says, the approval was given by the National Council on Privatization as at 12th of April, and they're looking to setting this up within the next 90 days.
Yes.
I mean, we're talking about restructuring the capital base as well too, so that they can lend a lot more. And the capital base they're talking about here, they're talking about a 250 billion naira capital base for the Bank of Agriculture,
purpose.
so that they can lend a lot more. So
Right.
it's a good move. Let's just hope that they can follow through, and we expect that in 3 months' time we'll be able to
reap the benefits,
reap the
maybe, or
benefits of
start
this.
to reaping the
And
benefits.
yeah,
Let's not get ahead of ourselves, but we see that. But it's a good expectation. I mean, it makes sense that we're expecting that results in that shorter time. The Director General of the Bureau of Public Enterprise, Alex Okoro, disclosed this yesterday in Abuja during a meeting with the management of the Bank of Agriculture, and it's commendable to note that. The lead capital consortium has been tasked with reviewing the financial due diligence of the bank, and implementation is expected to be seen within the period of 90 calendar days. Thank you, Gbolahan. Let's move on to you, Justin. Let's look at the story from the Guardian newspaper. The headline reads, El Rufai asks appointees to resign by the end of April. I wonder how they feel about this. Now, he's asked them, as part of their resignation process, they should submit the resignation letters along with a handover note that should be signed by the potential appointee on behalf of the ministries, departments, and agencies, or the office to which they have been appointed. Please, how do we address this?
There's I mean, there's really nothing much to go back and forth about. This is expected when you're a political appointee,
Right.
especially after every election cycle.
Mm.
It is expected that you should review, just like those of us in the private sector, right? You
Mhm.
get to sit down once in a year with your boss and have an appraisal session, and he
Yes.
tells you, did you do well? Did you do badly? You need to improve here. You need to improve there. Unfortunately, for some people, you're in the lowest 5%, and the policies you need to go. But that's the private sector. It's not too different in the public sector. You should review your appointees in the aftermath of every election cycle or whatever interval you choose, and that's what Mr. El Rufai has done. The thing, though, that jumps out at me in this article is there's a quote here. It says, the governor will exercise his constitutional prerogative to decide on reappointment while giving the Cardinal Ministry of Finance adequate time to compute severance pay and reconcile any liabilities. Now, he had indicated that some people might be coming back, right? Some people might be reappointed. Now, I have a challenge with, if you're going to reappoint people, decide on that now. Don't pay a man, don't spend government and public money on severance pay to a person that you are going to reappoint. That's wasting.
Therein
public
lies
sector
the key
funds.
point to this story.
Yeah, they shouldn't
Because-
do that. If you know you're going to retain Mr. X, tell him now.
Now, so he knows that when he doesn't get his severance pay,
It's because he
Is
still
the-
has a job.
You're not
Exactly.
double paying him.
Mhm.
If
Exactly.
it then happens at the end of his tenure, then you're paying him twice.
I mean, we see this kind
That's
of
what jumps
recklessness
out.
a lot. That's why we have people who are in the National Assembly who used to be governors in some states collecting pensions, right, for being governors, and then they are still
Still
on the public
collecting salary,
payroll. It's
yeah.
outrageous. I mean, I wouldn't say we're the only country where this happens, but I would place a bet that we might
but
be.
are you anticipating that this will probably be his line of action? Maybe there's a letter that follows this announcement to just indicate that certain people are going to be retained.
It's plausible, but we're only reacting to what's written in the story.
Okay, and that's from the Guardian newspaper. Please go through the details to read and extract the import for yourself. Let's go through the next story from Thisday newspaper. Thank you, Justin. I'll stick with you for this next one. The Economic and Financial Crimes Commission, EFCC, yesterday rearrested a former judge of the Federal High Court. Her name is Justice Rita Ofili-Ajumogobia. She's been standing trial since November of 2016, where she was first arraigned alongside Godwin Obla, who's an SAN, a former prosecution counsel. They were first arraigned alongside together by the EFCC on a 30 counts charge bordering on alleged perversion of the course of justice, unlawful enrichment, and forgery. Well, they said the reason for why they are rearresting her is for them to enable them a fresh criminal charge against her. Please take us through the story as we see that shortly after the arrest happened, shortly after the Lagos High Court struck out the 30 counts charge bordering on corruption against the same person.
This story is an indictment on the EFCC, its leadership, its operatives, the entire infrastructure of the EFCC.
In what way?
I'm getting into it.
Okay.
I'm getting into it. So why did the judge strike? First of all, let's look at the timeline of this particular case. They were first arrested and arraigned in November 2016. It's dragged on to April 2019. Several dates are very key in the body of the story for those who will read it. February 2018. In February 2018, what happened? The EFCC came back and asked the court to drop the bribery charges.
Could we use the word onogeresque?
Well,
Because they are
so-
alleging that the set sum of $793,000, $793,800 precisely, passed through the judge's domiciliary accounts between 2012 and 2015.
So there are two sides of analyzing the story.
Okay.
One is looking at the actual context of what was she accused of and what actually happened, and how, on the other hand, the EFCC bungled the prosecution of this case. $793,000 was turnover in her account for 3 years.
793,800.
793,800. Now, that is money that passed through the account in a 3-year period. That is not a sitting balance in the account. We had the same kind of conflict or misunderstanding with the Onoyen issue, right?
The Chief
They
Justice
threw
of
out
the-
numbers and said this happened and that happened. And then in the story it says the money was used to buy a house in London. Okay, this is just one side of it, right? You couldn't prove this case in court. You allowed it drag out. Yesterday, the judge struck it out finally after a series of turnaround by EFCC. Why did they strike it out? It turns out the court didn't have jurisdiction, and the EFCC knew from the jump that this court didn't have jurisdiction.
Why go ahead?
So why go ahead? So we can talk about this in several ways. Is this criminal negligence? Is this collusion to pervert the course of justice by the EFCC itself? I don't know, but if it talks like a duck, walks like a duck, it's probably a duck.
Could it be used against them? I'm
By
curious.
who? By who? Who's going to take the fall? Now the judge who struck it out yesterday was very, very, very nasty, as in he handed it down to the EFCC,
in
right?
In
the way he expressed his displeasure, that they wasted the time of the court, and he complained about, unfortunately, the law not giving the room for the prosecution to be sanctioned. Now, I don't know about that. How can people not be sanctioned for such obvious negligence and miscarriage of justice? Because that's what this is. If Justice what's her name, the lady, Rita Ajumogobia, if she is innocent of the charges, if you have dragged her name through the mud for 3 years, starting 2016, and you couldn't prove the case, and then you came and wrote to the court at the end of the day, EFCC's lawyer wrote to the court saying, yes, we acknowledge that the court doesn't have jurisdiction, so we want to drop the charges. Wow. Now, here is the kicker. Yesterday, after the judgment was given and she was released by the court, the EFCC rearrested her immediately. There was mild drama based on the story.
Yes.
She had...
It played out like a courtroom drama.
Yeah, she had a huge sigh of relief. She was grinning ear to ear, and then she stepped out of the courtroom, and there's this gang of EFCC operatives in their red jackets, I can imagine, waiting to jump her. So she runs back into the court, seeking refuge from the judge, and the judge says, unfortunately, the case file has officially been closed, so I cannot make any statements for your protection or all of that.
Could this be seen as an affront to the judiciary? Because it's playing out like one, or am I wrong?
I will simply appeal to the National Assembly. There are 3 arms of government in this country: the executive, the judiciary, and the legislature. Clearly, there's all-out war between the executive and the judiciary. We need the National Assembly.
Is it that clear, though?
It is clear.
It is clear.
It is clear. Let's address the elephant in the room. It is clear as daylight.
Okay. All right. Thank you, Justin. Let's take a few messages. A few messages here.
A few messages from WhatsApp. We have this one from Taiwo. Taiwo says the move by the federal government and Bank of Agriculture is the right one, so long will be seen to a logical conclusion with emphasis on transparency and fairness to all. Oluzio here says this is a long shot, guys, but could Justice Ofili and Onorian's case be connected politically? Hashtag Rivers, hashtag FG, hashtag overzealous EFCC. Just thinking. Politics is over, guys. And then Tunde Busari says the reason the judge's case was thrown out was because the EFCC did not go through the NJC to sanction her first. Now the NJC has advised she be sacked, and that's why EFCC is filing fresh charges. And then a few more comments. Prince here says even if they are reappointed, so in reference to the severance pay, even if they are reappointed, there can't be double pay. Severance payment is subject to number of years in service.
And also, just buttressing the points or emphasizing the reason why EFCC rearrested Ofili-Ajumogobia, Justice Ofili. They said that in a statement they released, excuse me, they said the commission actually rearrested Ofili-Ajumogobia in line with the decision of the appeal court in Lagos in a case involving one justice, Hailadzira Nganjiwa, where it said that the judge could not be prosecuted until he or she had either been dismissed or compulsorily retired by the NJC. But we encourage you to go through the details for yourself when you get through the stories on the Thisday newspaper for this morning. Our next story is Justin. I seem to have a preference this morning, but
you're putting me on blast.
It's okay. So the Punch newspaper is where we visit next, Justin. Nigeria loses 353 billion naira to illegal gold mining in 3 years. It is what a call from the Ijeh Youth Council and Bayelsa are trumpeting. I would say they said they've lost this said sum and sold that in the international markets between 2016 and 2018 without any revenue accruing to the government. However, it's worthy of note that illegal miners have reaped the gain according to investigations. Your thoughts?
What has happened with legal gold mining in Nigeria is an economic and financial crime.
And very little has been said about that.
Yeah, and guess whose
Over
job
time.
it should be?
CC.
EFCC. Yes, because stepping away from this particular story, growing up as a teenager, I knew about mining in Nigeria. It's been going on for ages.
But we heard more about iron ore mining.
Oh,
and
trust
other
me, the gold
minerals.
business has been the rave for a long time.
I mean, just like you mentioned,
Right.
Valentine, when well, at least as far back as I remember from secondary school, we weren't really taught. Gold was really, other West African countries like Ghana.
So it seemed as
Ivory
though we
Coast.
didn't have much gold
Yes,
here.
there wasn't a lot of concentration on that, but it's great to hear this.
It's been the best kept non-secret secret,
Uh-huh.
right? And if you go through the story, the minister's comment, the minister of
Mines and Steel Development, Alhaji
Bawa Buhari's his sometimes when our public officials speak, I wonder if they listen to themselves.
But
He
let's
makes-
get to this
You
thing.
make self-indicting statements,
Okay.
and because nobody's being held to account. Okay, so he basically gives us this narrative of the people who have the mining leases, they've been operating it illegally. Okay, so there are people who have licenses, right? We know them, and they've been operating it in an illegal manner, i.e., not according to the terms of the leases that they have. So we knew this. We know this.
Let me just play ignorance for a second. Well, could these be the same people that were asked by the federal government a few days ago to vacate their
Yes.
locations? Okay.
Yes. So these are not unknown quantities. We know the locations, right? We know where the leases, the cadastral zones, and all of that are. And you come out because the bubble has burst, and you're saying things like, well, they weren't operating it according to terms. They sublet their acreage to smaller artisanal miners who have degraded the environment and blah blah blah. And we've lost 18 tons of gold over the past 3 years, equating 353 billion. Okay, but it's somebody's job to hold these people to account. And instead of speaking about the fact that an economic and financial crime has been perpetrated against the people of the Federal Republic of Nigeria for the past X years, you're talking about, we're implementing reforms. Yes, it's good to implement reforms, but what kind of reforms are you implementing? You now want to organize the gold trade. Okay, that's fine. But creating a formal gold exchange, which essentially is a summary of what they said here, doesn't deal with the fact of, doesn't tell us how you want to address illegal mining and smuggling of gold out of Nigeria. We are losing tons and tons of revenue because of this. And certain sections of the country are already passing comments and not finding this funny because it's the Commonwealth, right? We've all had the Niger Delta issues where oil is extracted from a certain part of the country, and there's this argument about it's my oil, it's not my oil, it belongs to all of us. The gold also belongs to all of us. Some people are saying
$1.16 billion.
yes, and the revenue should come to the central government account for redistribution to all Nigerians instead of people hiding under certain things to, mine the gold and take it away.
Wow.
All right, thank you very much, Justin, for that analysis. We have a few comments here on WhatsApp. A few people still reacting to stories from previous stories that came in previously. Prince here says, Prince, we've read your comments. I'll go on to the next one here. This is from Omolomo, who says, if the Nigerian government is actually interested in developing agriculture, the central bank should give fresh license. And then Lekki 247 on Twitter says the judge that gave the judgment in favor of Ofili is now in trouble. Watch out, or will probably be in trouble as well. And let's go to our next story, and this time Gbolahan, I'll favor you for this one. Obafemi Awolowo University students decry poor welfare, victimization, and call for VC's probe. Their Vice Chancellor is Professor Etokbe Ogunbodede. This story is from the Vanguard newspaper. And this is just lamenting the poor welfare condition, that they've been victimized, that a legal entity has been prescribed. But please, can you take us through this story, Gbolahan?
Yes.
What's going on in OAU?
I mean, this is probably one of those general issues that we find out that occurs at most of our universities anyway. And the issue is actually stemming from the fact that they are saying that the university and campus is overcrowded. That's the accommodation anyway.
Yes.
Usually at Obafemi Awolowo University, you normally have about 70% of the students staying on campus or so.
Yes.
But as at present, they're complaining that, of course, there should have actually been new facilities that should have been built or so. And the allegation is that the vice chancellor is actually responsible for misappropriating funds for the new facilities that should have been put up or so. So right now at the moment, what they're talking about is that, of course, what had actually happened is that the school now decided to send out, or decongest the accommodation, and then send out a lot of students to seek accommodation outside the campus or so. So there's a lot of cry right now at the moment that, of course, there's a lot of when you're looking at students that now have to commute themselves from the sites that they're staying on outside the campus. They're paying quite a lot for transportation fees or so. And so, of course, there's a lot of clamor saying that, of course, there should have actually been more buildings that should have been put up at the university campus.
Yes, it's important to mention that. Just to also state from the article that the VC and the university have come out to say that they're appealing to those who can partner with them to build accommodation for their students at affordable rates. So why are developers running away from investing in student accommodation?
Well, when you look at the situation, it's, of course, if it makes business sense, a developer would always go into it. You wouldn't actually find this situation happening in places like Unilag in Lagos, of course, because there are a lot of student accommodations in and around the university environment as well, and that's probably because they know they generate good income from that as well too. So when you're talking about Ife, it's the onus is on the investors to obviously look at the viability of investing money in such projects, or so, if it's going to be viable. So the one thing that really strikes me the most here as well too is that when you're talking about prescribing the student union, I'm thinking, does the university really have the powers or the authority to actually suspend the student union if they haven't really done anything that is so far away other than the normal basic student union protest or so? So that raises a lot of questions here.
All right. Thank you very much indeed. Now, just to clarify that the university has said we didn't say that they're an illegal entity by prescribing them. All we have just done is suspended them. But we will be looking at this story and, obviously updates from this as well. I'll still stay with you for this, Gbolahan. 811 million naira debt. The Federal Airports Authority of Nigeria have said that they're going to withdraw services from some airports, including Gombe, Kebbi, Bebi, and this is due to loan defaultment. They haven't paid back the loans. Can you take us through this story?
It raises a lot of questions about the airports that we have in Nigeria. We have so many numerous airports, and there are plans to develop several other airports as well too. And it talks about the viability of these airports as well. How viable are these airports? I mean, I was actually having a report by the Nigerian Bureau of Statistics, obviously, that talked about the passenger flights, that the number of passengers that we have for 2018, and I think the figures were about 10 million passengers for the local flights, and for international flights we're talking about 4.4 million, the numbers of passengers that went through our airports in 2018. And you'll find out that most of all these airports anyway, the majority of traffic is usually in the Abuja airport, Lagos airport, and the Port Harcourt airport. They probably take about 70 to 80% of the traveling population. The rest, you wonder what the airports are meant for and what exactly are they doing.
Well, I mean, we're hearing figures like them owing 607.9 million naira, 124.5 million naira, 76.8 million naira. And then you wonder if they're making enough money with regards to paying FA, and this is over many years.
Yes, absolutely.
So if they're not able to pay, are they viable? Should they be shut down?
Exactly.
Do we need all these airports?
Which is where I'm going.
If I may, don't those amounts accrue based on a percentage of ticket prices that they are supposed to get? So is it that passengers flew for free?
That's what I'm wondering. Why are they owing? And this is over many years. So you wonder, so who then do it? Because again, I asked the question, do we have enough airports? Obviously, clearly not, because we still have issues we can't say close it down in Gombe, we can't say close Kebbi airport, because people fly to these destinations. They're looking at attracting more investors to these states. And how can you do that when you don't have an airport that is working properly? Well, come 1st of May, they don't pay up.
Well,
FAAN has said they're coming to
they're going
close
to
them.
withdraw their
They're not being
services.
withdraw services from them.
Yep.
All right, let's hope that they reach some form of agreement and we don't get to the point as they did with Oshubi Airstrip where they closed down, and we know how much of a hassle it was for passengers in that time frame. All right, Justin, I'll come back to you for the next story. Police arrest dismissed cop for alleged gun running. The police have been in the news recently. This was reported in the Punch newspaper. And the dismissed police officer has been identified as Felix Nwogugu. And the Commissioner of Police in the state, Mr. Ene Okon, confirmed his arrest and said he was nabbed in connection with an armed robbery case in the state.
Yes, the police have been in the news. So have the people that the police have killed extrajudicially. May God rest, or may the souls of the dead rest.
Amen.
In this particular case, it sounds like a good soundbite, especially for those of us who have the thing with the way the police have been misbehaving and the fact that they need to be called to order.
Yeah.
But when you actually do read the story, it's confusing. So the commissioner said Mr. Felix Nwogugu was arrested in connection with an armed robbery case in the state. But in the body of the story, that's not what happened. A patrol team cited a couple of men on a motorbike who, on citing the patrol team, feeling they were being surveilled, bailed into the bush and left the bike and the bag on the floor. They gave chase and they apprehended one of them. And when they searched the bag, they found a locally made pistol. The guy who was apprehended is named Chidozie Martins from Ishalangwa in Imo State.
Yes.
And when he was interrogated, he said he named Felix Nwogugu, who is the dismissed policeman.
Yes.
Now, what was found was, to be very precise, a locally made revolver pistol, and 3 pieces of ammunition, bullets, I guess. And he named Felix Nwogugu as the owner who had given him this. And when Felix was arrested, he claimed that Felix gave him the gun to protect himself during the elections because there were a lot of hoodlums in his community, blah, blah, blah. And Felix confirmed that, yes, the gun is mine, and I gave it to him to protect himself during the election period. Now, to me, this is illegal possession of firearms.
Yes.
There is nothing in this story that speaks about there was an armed robbery event that these people were involved in. Clearly, they are not the best characters to have on the streets, but just to be correct about what did happen. I was wondering when I had to go back to the beginning when I read the commissioner said there was an armed robbery case. I've read through the story and
perhaps it's not properly reported by the Punch newspaper because he said one statement. Unfortunately, the detail of the story does not, if it doesn't show the link between his statement and what actually happened.
What actually happened. We're constrained by the facts available, the details available in the story. It's just there's nothing here about armed robbery.
All right. Well, it just goes to just positive news right there that the police is clamping down, hopefully, on the operations of the bad eggs in the police force, whether present or dismissed. Final story here: Nigeria produces 90% of rice it consumes, says Minister Chief Audu Ogbe. Gbolahan, what's your take on this?
Yes, this is just a classic case of say it over and over again, and maybe we'll believe it eventually, because this is not the first time that we'll be hearing that Nigeria produces 90% of the rice that we consume. I mean, this comment, as you said, came from the Minister of Agriculture, and he mentioned this at the Institute for Agricultural Research. They were having an event or a meeting which is themed harnessing the potential of agricultural export in Nigeria. So right now, at the moment, of course, according to the Minister of Agriculture, we're producing 90% of the rice that we consume. And not only are we now talking about we being self-sufficient on rice, but we're actually now talking about exporting rice to places such as America, Europe, and even China as well too. And I mean, this is very interesting.
This would offset the money we spend importing pizza from London. Yeah?
Absolutely.
Besides
good.
that, I'm glad you actually talked about importing. So definition of terms: production is defined by the dictionary before me as the action of making or manufacturing from components or raw materials or the process of being so manufactured.
Yes.
Nowhere in this definition did I see bringing through the borders, smuggling.
Absolutely.
But I mean, it's conversation we can extend.
It's a longer, lengthy conversation, and let's leave that because
That's just my cynical side.
Baba, retire, please.
Justin, thank you for coming in. He's at Justin Ijeh on Twitter. Gbolahan is at Mr. G Quest. Thank you for your messages. Cruz, very quickly, let's take your message. It says, good morning, panelists. A lot of stories make our security outfit look like a children's setup that needs intervention from adults. Shaking my head, I think we need to start a road tour kind of public conference aimed at helping identifying how to help reform the security outfits in Nigeria. Help reform Nigeria as a whole is what we're saying.
Absolutely,
But
totally.
coming up next, we talk about your club, if you're a Manchester United fan or a Barca fan. Inside the locker room at 8:15. This is